Hello and welcome to this video on basic web app development in Python. In this tutorial, we are going to learn how to create a simple web application using Python and the popular web framework Flask. By the end of this video, you will have a solid understanding of how to create a basic web application in Python and implement the coding challenge at the end. Let's get started. Before we can start building our web application, we need to install Flask. Flask is a lightweight web framework for Python that makes it easy to create web applications. You can install it using pipe by running the following command in your terminal. This command will install Flask and all its dependencies on your system. I already have it installed, so I ignore this installation. Now let's create our first web application. A basic web application in Flask is just a Python script that defines a few routes and their corresponding function handlers. Here is an example of how to create a basic web application. In this example, we import the Flask class from the Flask module and create an instance of the Flask class. Then we define a route using the @app.route decorator, which maps the /URL, which is the root of the web app, to the hello function. The hello function returns the string hello world, which will be displayed in the browser. And finally, we run the application using the app.run. When we run the application on our machine, it starts the web app on the local host or IP address 127.0.0.1 and will use an empty port such as 8080 or 5000. We can check it by typing this address in a browser after running the app. Let's run the app, and as you see in the log, my app runs at this address 127.0.0.1 port 5000. I can click in this address and it goes to the browser and shows the hello world message. Now let's create a web app using a template. A template is a file that defines the structure of the web page and how it should be displayed. Flask will look for templates in the templates folder. So you need to create a folder with this name in your application and save that HTML template there. So I create a templates folder here, and here is an example of how to create a template. In this example, we create a basic HTML template with a title, a heading, and a placeholder for a variable named name. That means you need to have that name variable in your .py code. We can use this template to render the web page and replace the placeholder with the actual data. If you want to have some images or JavaScript for your web app, you need to create a folder named static and put those files over there. Now that we have a template, let's render it. We can use the render template function from the Flask module to render the template and pass in any variables we want to use. Here is an example of how to render the template. In this example, we import the render template function from the Flask module and use it to render the hello.html template. We also pass in a variable name with the value John Doe to be used in the template. Let's run the app. So as you see, our application picked the name variable as John Doe and show it here. Another important aspect of web development is handling GET requests. Flask makes it easy to handle GET requests using the request object. Here is an example of how to handle that. In this example, we import the request object from the Flask module. We define a route that only handles GET requests and use the request.args dictionary to access the GET data. To test, we can pass query using parameters in the URL we use to access the page. It's like this URL. Let's run the code. Since I have not provided the get parameter, it returns an error. Now let's correct the request. So I add the parameter name equals John and hit the enter and it returns hello John. If I change it to name Mehdi, it returns hello Mehdi. Coding challenge. You are given a CSV file that contains weather temperature captured of a city for 3 days during 24 hours. The CSV file columns are day of months, hour, and temperature. Write a web application that creates a line chart of the temperatures for every specific day, like day 1, day 2, and day 3, and save it to a file under the static folder. Also, create a HTML template that would show the image of your plot in the page when you send the day of the month through the GET request. Your CSV file named data.csv should contain 3 columns, day, hour, and temp, and it has 72 rows. You can generate your own data set or use this one. And your output should look like this one. /chart, question mark, day equals 1. Shows the temperature for day 1. If I change it to day 2, it shows temperature for day 2 and day 3 as well. Solution. First of all, I have data.csv file in the root of my application. Then inside the web application, first I import the Flask, render template, and request, and also CSV and matplotlib modules. Then create the app using the Flask class. I define a function to read data from the CSV file. I define an empty list. Then open the CSV file to read the data. We have covered opening CSV files in the previous sections. Then for each row of the data in the CSV file, I append 3 columns to the data. Also note that we have used try except block here. So in case there is any issue in our data, we can pass those data. I use the pass keyword here so we don't break the application in case of the exception. Then I have another function, create chart, for each specific day. So day is passed as an argument. The purpose of this function is to filter hours and temperature for each specific day. So in that case, we have a separate hours and temperatures list for each day. And then we create a line chart based on those hours and temperatures and save the file inside the static folder. And finally, we close the plot. Here's the main part. I add the root /chart with the get method for the chart method, and inside that I get the day from the get request and call the render template function for a template I have created, tempchart.html, with the parameter day equals day. And then inside the main application for 3 days, I call the create chart with the parameter I, which is the day. So this loop creates the chart for 3 days and save them in the static folder. And then we run the application by calling the app.run. And here is the template I have created. And here I use the variable day. And then I added an image tag. The source refers to the PNG files that created for the charts inside the static folder. So I create the static folder here to save those PNG files. And now let's run the code. Pass the right parameter, day 1, day 2, and day 3. If we go back to the static folder, we should see that these 3 PNG files for the charts have been created here. We have covered the basics of Python web app development using Flask, rendering templates and handling form data. Remember that Flask is a lightweight web framework that makes it easy to create web applications in Python. But there are many other frameworks that you can use to make more complex applications. I hope you find this tutorial helpful. If you have any questions or need more information, please feel free to reach out. Thank you for watching.